impending tariffs from Canada and Mexico, half of the top 50 top-selling vehicles in the U.S. and 60% of the overall volumes could be impacted by these tariffs. And of that, 40% is vehicles priced below $40,000.
Your next car purchase is probably going to be more expensive thanks to President Donald Trump.
Mr. President, have you decided specifically what the auto tariff rate should be?
Yeah, I probably will tell you that on April 2nd, but it'll be in the neighborhood of 25%.
Around 5.3 million vehicles are built in Canada and Mexico, 70% of which are destined for the United States. Those vehicles will soon be subject to 25% tariffs, which were just announced by the Trump administration. And the companies paying the higher price to import those vehicles are very likely to pass that cost along to the consumer. You may not see higher MSRPs right away, says Mike Wall, Executive Director for Automotive Analysis at S&P Global Mobility. But you will likely see fewer incentives and special deals at dealerships as dealers get stingier about their vehicle inventories. Perhaps fewer vehicles even get made as manufacturers weigh the costs of paying 25% duties on key parts and components. Eventually, the higher cost of building and selling a car in the US will filter down to the consumer.
You're going to see if the tariffs do take effect, you're going to see a lot of the same behaviors in the market that you saw during COVID and even during the semiconductor shortage, where you're going to see, OEMs basically bring incentives down for the pre-tariff vehicles. You're going to see inventory lean out because it's going to be more difficult to produce vehicles in the U.S. There's a lot of components coming in, and the border is just, administration is not capable right now of handling these new tariffs. You're going to see consumers rush to buy these pre-tariff vehicles.
The global auto industry is at a crossroads. With President Trump proposing a 25% tariff on vehicles imported from Canada and Mexico, we are witnessing a dramatic shift in economic policy, one that could have far-reaching consequences for manufacturers, suppliers, vendors, workers, and consumers alike. But is this really about strengthening the U.S. auto industry? Or are we entering an era of unintended consequences? Let's take a deep dive. Stellantis chairman John Elkann was among the first to publicly criticize the proposed tariffs, stating, "We fundamentally believe that the first Trump administration, as it negotiated the USMCA, was very cognizant of making sure that US content was in the products we built in Canada and Mexico, which we believe should remain tariff-free. The USMCA was created to ensure regional economic cooperation, reinforcing manufacturing supply chains between the US, Canada, and Mexico. Now, this sudden tariff proposal threatens to upend years of investment in a system designed to benefit all three countries. The question remains, will these tariffs really bring jobs back to the US, or will they just increase costs and disrupt supply chains? Stellantis relies heavily on its operations in Canada and Mexico, producing popular models like the Ram heavy-duty pickups, the Jeep Compass, and the Chrysler Pacifica minivan. The sudden tariff announcement has already caused ripple effects, such as Stellantis halting production at its Ontario plant, meant to manufacture the next-generation Jeep Compass. And it's not just Stellantis.
This tariff persisted with Mexico and Canada, it would mean billions of losses for the domestic car industry, huge impact for jobs in the U.S.
Ford CEO Jim Farley warns that these tariffs could blow a hole in the U.S. industry that we have never seen. He argues that while Trump's stated goal is to strengthen American manufacturing, the tariffs could actually give foreign automakers like Toyota, Hyundai, and BMW an unexpected advantage. Why? Because vehicles imported from Canada and Mexico would face the tariff, but those from South Korea, Japan, and Europe would not, giving them a massive price advantage. This could result in American automakers losing even more market share.
As far as tariffs are concerned, we want a comprehensive policy, not just towards Mexico and Canada. We understand all the pressures on the border and with drugs, but the reality is, Hyundai, Kia, and Toyota can import millions of vehicles through South Korea and Japan without these tariffs. We need a comprehensive look at such a tariff change.
But this issue extends beyond just automakers. Suppliers and vendors are also feeling the pressure. Many U.S. parts manufacturers source materials like steel and aluminum from Canada and Mexico. With additional tariffs in place, these costs will rise, forcing suppliers to either absorb the losses or pass them on to automakers, who will then pass them on to consumers. Philip Daniele, CEO of AutoZone, has already stated that if we get tariffs, we will pass those tariff costs back to the consumer. This means higher prices not only for vehicles, but also for parts, repairs, and maintenance.
We reached out to Alex Partners, automotive consulting firm. We said, what's the potential impact of a 25% tariff? And they've gamed it out at $400 to $500 cost increase per vehicle, because each vehicle has between 2,500 and 3,000 pounds of aluminum and steel in each vehicle.
Auto suppliers such as Magna International, one of the largest auto parts manufacturers in North America, have also voiced concern. The company, which has major operations in both the US and Mexico, warned that tariffs could disrupt supply chains, lead to cost-cutting measures, and force automakers to reconsider how they source parts. It's not as simple as just shifting production to the US, said a Magna executive. Complex supply chains mean any added cost will trickle down through the entire industry. So how much will this really cost consumers? Let's break it down. Roughly 5.3 million vehicles are built in Canada and Mexico annually, and 70% of them are destined for the US. Under the proposed tariffs, each of these vehicles will face a 25% import tax. A $25,000 vehicle imported from Canada or Mexico could now cost upwards of $6,250 more. Some estimates suggest large trucks and SUVs could see price hikes of over $10,000. That's not just bad for consumers, it's bad for demand, and ultimately bad for American manufacturers. Industry expert Mike Wall explains the ripple effect. A 25% tariff is just massive in this industry. As that price goes up, consumers exit. They're going to hold off, they're going to wait. They may go to the used market. And if pricing on the new market goes up, guess what? That pricing on the used market is going to be impacted because it's a supply and demand thing. Even Tesla is not immune. CFO Vaibhav Taneja has acknowledged that the EV giant still relies on components sourced internationally, and these tariffs would significantly impact their profitability. So how are automakers responding? Most are being cautious in their statements, but behind the scenes, they are preparing for the worst. Volkswagen, which operates Mexico's largest factory in Puebla, is one of the most impacted automakers. The plant, which produces nearly 350,000 vehicles annually, including the Jetta, Tiguan, and Taos models, supplies a significant portion of its output to the US market. A Volkswagen spokesperson issued a statement reaffirming the company's commitment to free and fair trade, while noting that they are actively monitoring the situation and planning for various scenarios. If the tariffs are imposed, Volkswagen could be forced to shift production or raise prices, both of which would have significant consequences for American consumers. Meanwhile, the American Automotive Policy Council, which represents Ford, GM, and Stellantis, is calling for vehicles that meet USMCA standards to be exempt from tariffs. The group argues that American automakers, who have invested billions into regional manufacturing to comply with USMCA's strict content requirements, should not be penalized for following trade agreements that were negotiated under the previous Trump administration. Ford's Jim Farley has been making frequent trips to Washington, warning lawmakers about the cost increases caused by tariffs on steel and aluminum. These hidden costs don't just affect auto manufacturers, they also impact suppliers, dealerships, and ultimately, every American who needs a car. He calls it cost and chaos. And that's exactly what this policy shift is creating.
And Melissa, Jim Farley, CEO of Ford, said yesterday at an investor conference that he would be in Washington today to convey his thoughts to the Trump administration. We have reached out to find out if he's actually meeting with the president or simply the president's staff. But one way or the other, the message will be similar to what he said yesterday. And this is the quote that got a lot of attention in regards to a question about the impact or potential impact of tariffs if they were implemented. And he wrote, so far, what we're seeing is a lot of cost and a lot of chaos.
So where does this leave us? The proposed tariffs may be aimed at protecting American jobs, but the reality is far more complicated. While the intention is to bring more auto production back to the US, The reality is that automakers could pass these costs onto consumers, leading to higher prices, fewer sales, and potential job losses in the very industry these tariffs are supposed to protect. What do you think? Will these tariffs achieve their intended goals, or will they backfire and create an economic domino effect? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth coverage of the auto industry. This is Kevin Liu for Todo Machina, and thanks for watching.